You suffer because you don't yet understand the shadow within yourself. Carl Jung and Stoicism Decoded, opening the questions no one wants to face. Why do you often feel angry, easily offended, or deeply insecure without knowing why? Why does the more you try to stay positive, the more fake, exhausted, and lifeless you feel? Why do your relationships keep repeating the same painful endings? Why do you react so strongly to things that seem insignificant? It's not because you're too weak. It's not because you lack understanding. It's because there is a part of you that has never been honestly faced. The shadow. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This video is not about eliminating the darkness, but about understanding it and stepping into the light with honesty. We will dive deep into the concept of the shadow in Carl Jung's analytical psychology and place it side by side with how Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus approached this inner struggle thousands of years ago. The shadow is not just darkness. It is the part of the soul that was left behind. And only when you are brave enough to enter the dark can you truly find your own light. Subscribe to the Stoicism Jungian channel if you want to begin a real journey. A journey back to the self. Like the video if you feel the shadow within you beginning to stir. And share this with someone who is exhausted by their own mind. Part 1. What is the shadow? Why does modern man keep running from himself? You are not defined by who you think you are, but by what you dare to see operating silently within you. Want your fathers when they paces. Carl Gustav Jung 1.1. What is the shadow? In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the shadow is the part of the unconscious that has been repressed, denied, or deemed unacceptable within us. It includes instinctual desires that are forbidden by society, religion, or family. Anger, jealousy, envy that we refuse to admit. Parts of our personality we once expressed but were mocked, shamed, or crushed in childhood. Untapped potential that remains dormant because we fear failure or fear success. Carl Jung stated, "The shadow does not contain only evil. It also contains good qualities that have been repressed, feared, and rejected for a long time." 1.2. Why does the shadow exist in every human being? From a young age, you were taught to be good, polite, controlled. Emotions like anger, sadness, rebellion, the courage to say no, were slowly pushed down. We learned to wear a mask to be accepted. We learned to play the role of the good person, so we wouldn't be abandoned. Each time that happened, a real part of you was not allowed to live. It was pushed into a hidden corner. That is where the shadow begins to form. 1.3. But here is the problem. What is buried does not disappear. You may forget, but the shadow remembers. You may pretend you are fine, but your unconscious is never silent. It reveals itself through overreactions in communication too. Sudden anger that seems to come from nowhere. Feelings of jealousy toward others that you refuse to acknowledge. Harshly criticizing others for the very traits you are hiding. And the haunting sense that I am living, but not as my true self. 1.4. Marcus Aurelius. Look within. Within you is the source of all answers. Stoic philosophy teaches, do not let external circumstances rule you. The only thing you truly control is your inner world. But how can you control something you are not even brave enough to face? This is where Stoicism and Jung meet. Stoicism emphasizes controlling reactions, so emotions do not drag you away. Jung emphasizes understanding the roots of emotions, so the unconscious does not dominate you. If you only learn how to suppress anger without understanding why you are angry, you are merely placing a layer of fake stoicism over a fractured soul. 1.5. Why do modern humans keep running from themselves? Today's world encourages positive thinking while avoiding negative emotions, self-development but only on the surface, self-love yet fearing loneliness so deeply that people trade away themselves just to be loved. Modern humans fear silence because silence allows the shadow to speak. They fear being alone because being alone forces them to face what they cannot understand. So they escape through overloaded work schedules, noisy social media server, shallow relationships, pleasures that merely fill the void by. But the shadow does not disappear. It waits, and when it grows strong enough, it erupts as identity crises, depression, or self-destructive behaviors. 1.6. Epictetus, no man is free who does not master his own mind. You cannot control what you do not understand. You cannot heal if you do not know where the wound is. And you cannot truly love if you do not understand the dark part operating within you. So if the shadow is the rejected part, what is hiding it within us? Is it the social mask, also known as the persona, that exhausts us every day because we must keep performing? In part 2, we will explore together persona, hypocrisy, and the exhaustion of living inauthentically. Part 2. The shadow is not meant to be erased, but integrated. We have heard too much about overcoming negativity, letting go of the past, living positively every day. But Carl Jung warned, no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow is not an evil part that must be destroyed. It is the raw, truthful part buried out of fear, rejected for not fitting social standards. It is the forgotten cry of childhood, the anger that was never released, the desires, fears, and instincts you once labeled as shameful. From a Stoic perspective, Epictetus said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. But if our very thinking is being manipulated by the shadow, then every thought becomes a burden. Why must we integrate rather than eliminate the shadow? Carl Jung used the word integration as a lifelong healing journey, not an attempt to fix oneself. This closely echoes Marcus Aurelius' teaching. Be at peace with yourself. Everything begins there. When we try to become a good person, we unconsciously push the shadow deeper into the unconscious. But that is precisely when the shadow becomes most dangerous. It rises in impulsive behavior. It hides within judgments of others. It makes you easily angered, deeply insecure, or overly sensitive to trivial words. And worst of all, it turns you into someone you no longer recognize. Self-observation, signs the shadow is controlling you. When you intensely hate a certain type of person, even when they have done nothing wrong, it is very likely you are projecting a rejected part of yourself. When you overreact, explode with anger, jealousy, or inferiority without knowing why that is the voice of an unheard darkness. When you constantly feel disrespected or excluded, sometimes it is not because of others, but because you rejected an authentic part of yourself long ago. Jung said, you can only heal what you are willing to bring your attention to, especially what disturbs you most. And Seneca advised, no one is strong who has never faced their own weakness. Modern psychology. Darkness is the map of growth. Today, many therapists continue to expand Jung's theory. They view the shadow as a buried treasure containing inspiration, creative instinct, and primal life force. Why? Because when you recognize, accept, and learn to dialogue with the shadow, it no longer controls you. You become the one steering the ship of your own consciousness. But one question remains. If the shadow lives in the unconscious, how do we recognize it? How do we know what is a natural reaction and what is a reaction driven by darkness? In the next part, we will step into psychology's mirror, recognizing the shadow, the people we hate, the things we fear, the moments we lose control. Part 3, signs of recognizing the shadow, the people we hate, the things we fear, the reactions we can't control. Carl Jung once wrote, the shadow is everything the ego refuses to acknowledge as part of itself. Want some of the erasures? It is not far away. It is the very part you refuse to see in the mirror. You don't need to search for the shadow in a dark room. It is present every day in sudden bursts of anger, in the judging looks we cast on others, and in the shame, guilt, or inferiority you have buried for many years. 1. The person you hate most may be the mirror of your shadow. Think about someone you dislike, a type of person who irritates you even though they haven't done anything seriously wrong. Maybe they are too confident, too loud, too cute, fake, or pitiful. Marcus Aurelius once said, others may do wrong, but how we respond is what we should concern ourselves with. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection. What you hate in others is very often the part of your own shadow that has not been accepted. You were once forbidden to express it. You fear that you, too, carry that trait. And because you cannot accept it, you push it outward and hate it in the form of someone else. A person who constantly criticizes selfish people may be someone who has never dared to live for themselves. A person who hates weakness may be denying an unhealed wound within their own soul. 2. Overactivated emotions where the shadow is sleeping. Have you ever found yourself reacting too strongly to a very simple remark? Someone casually says something and you feel struck so deeply it hurts. That is a sign the shadow is stirring. Stoicism teaches, no one can harm you without your consent. Epictetus. But to avoid being controlled, you must understand what is controlling you. Uncontrolled emotional reactions rarely come from the present moment. They come from the past, from wounds that were never named, never faced. Sometimes you are not angry because of a sentence, but because a memory has been awakened. Not because someone insulted you, but because they accidentally touched a thorn, something you tried to bury long ago. 3. When you must play a role, the persona is hiding the shadow. In Jung's theory, the persona is the social mask, the role we must play to be accepted. The introvert tries to appear extroverted. The wounded person pretends to be strong. The insecure person strives to look perfect. But you can only perform for so long. Inside, the shadow grows and demands to be seen. And when the distance between the persona, the role, and the shadow, the rejected part, becomes too wide, you begin to feel empty. Seneca once warned, "He who lives out of harmony with his true nature, even if he has everything, will always feel lacking." 4. Repeating the same problem, the shadow is spinning you in a loop. Do you keep meeting the same type of person in love? The same kind of relationship that wounds you again and again? Do you always fall into the role of the rescuer or the victim? An unnamed pattern keeps returning. The shadow does not disappear when avoided. It comes back through different situations, different faces, to force you to face it. If you see yourself somewhere in these descriptions, subscribe to the Stoicism Jungian channel, leave a comment about which shadow within you most needs to be understood, and share this video with someone struggling with emotions they cannot name. We do not run from the shadow. We learn to step into it with philosophy, with awareness. Part 4. Facing the shadow, the greatest courage of a lifetime. There is a bitter truth most of us avoid. Not everyone is brave enough to face themselves. Many people are willing to climb mountains, start businesses, overcome poverty or loss, but they cannot sit alone in silence and ask, who am I really? Facing the shadow is the first step of inner maturity. Carl Jung called it the descent into the underworld. Instead of rising through the glow of fame or a polished image, he urged human beings to step downward, to enter the deepest layers of the soul where darkness resides. There is no enlightenment without passing through darkness. No one becomes conscious merely by imagining light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. The shadow exists to be seen, not to be suppressed. And the pain you feel is simply the call of a part of you that has never been acknowledged. Stoicism. Courage is not in action, but in the inner world. Marcus Aurelius, in Meditations, repeatedly emphasized self-observation. Examine yourself each day to know what is yours and what belongs to others. Clear your mind of hasty judgments. That is the only path to freedom. Stoics do not seek light from the outside. They believe all stability begins with seeing clearly within. The shadow is not evil. It is the part obscured by the light of the ego, of prejudice, of habitual avoidance. And true courage, according to both Jung and Stoicism, is the ability to sit with the parts of yourself you dislike. Darkness does not destroy you, denying it does. You are not weak for feeling anger, jealousy, fear, or a desire to control. You only become dangerous when you refuse to admit these emotions exist. The shadow grows when you pretend you are fine. It becomes enraged when you try to think positively to escape pain. It silently controls behavior, emotions, and choices because it knows you are not yet brave enough to look directly at it. As Epictetus once wrote, "You cannot heal what you deny exists." Practice. How to face the shadow. 1. Acknowledge negative emotions without judgment. Instead of forcing yourself to be cheerful, be honest. I am angry. I am hurt. This recognition is the first step toward freedom. Reflective journaling. Self-inquiry. Each evening, ask, what did I react strongly to today? What does that say about me? Is there a part of me that has not been accepted? 3. Listen to what you hate in others. Sometimes What you hate in them is your shadow trying to say, I exist too. Acknowledge me. 4. Learn to sit in silence. No music, no phone, just you with yourself. This is where the shadow becomes most visible. Face to integrate, not to eliminate. The shadow does not need to be destroyed. It needs to be integrated, made a conscious part of who you are. On this path, the Stoic does not scream, does not indulge in self-pity. They remain anchored to one question. Is this truly mine, or is it something imposed upon me? From there, they keep what is real and let go of what is false. If you feel a shadow within you beginning to stir, know it is a sign of awakening. Subscribe to Stoicism Jungian so you don't miss the videos that help you continue this journey with steadiness. And leave a comment. Which shadow within me is waiting to be named? Part 5. The shadow is not the enemy. It is an invitation to return to the self. If you are feeling fear, inner conflict, or pain while exploring the darker parts of your mind, pause and listen to this. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the final signal you can still hear before your soul becomes completely buried beneath layers of masks. The shadow is the part of you that once existed but was rejected. As a child, you were angry, selfish, crying loudly, dreaming wildly. Then society, family, religion, school taught you what was right and what was wrong. You began cutting away pieces of your true self in order to be accepted. You became a lovable version of yourself, but lost your original core identity. Carl Jung called this the formation of the persona, the social mask. The mask helps you survive, but the shadow is what helps you live truthfully. And at some point, the shadow will speak to reclaim its rightful place. When you deny the shadow, it takes revenge through the unconscious. The more you pretend to be good, the more the shadow erupts as uncontrolled emotional reactions. You explode over a simple piece of feedback. You feel deeply hurt because someone is indifferent. You feel jealousy without understanding why. You sink into desire, then drown in shame. All of these are knocks on the door from the shadow. And as Carl Jung said, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light. You become enlightened by making the darkness conscious. Marcus Aurelius, see darkness as a test of the soul. Stoics do not fear suffering because they see it as training. Marcus Aurelius, in lonely nights, facing betrayal, death, and power, wrote, "Do not pray for an easy life. Pray to be strong enough to endure it." The human mind is like a fortress. No one can invade it unless the gates are opened from within. And that fortress does not grow strong by running from the shadow, but by understanding what it contains and choosing to live with responsibility. Integrating the shadow, not fixing yourself, but becoming yourself. You don't need to cure anger, you need to ask, what am I trying to protect? You don't need to eliminate jealousy, you need to see what insecurity has not yet healed. Every so-called negative emotion is a part of you that has not been embraced. The shadow is not trash. It is the forgotten part of the soul. I would rather be whole than be good. Carl Jung. And wholeness is when you no longer split yourself into the ideal self and the shameful self, but look at both with awareness and compassion. The strongest person is the one who understands their own darkness. A person who understands their shadow will no longer be easily manipulated by others, no longer react uncontrollably to criticism, no longer exhaust themselves trying to appear good, no longer fear losing love because they have not lost themselves. They are not clean, but clear in awareness. Not perfect, but real. Not clever, but honest with every emotion. And that is the core of a grounded soul. Part 6. Darkness and the art of living truthfully. The path back to the self. Once a person begins to recognize the shadow, the next step is to face it. And beyond that, to live truthfully with it. Carl Jung called this the integration of the shadow. In Stoic philosophy, Epictetus said, "We cannot choose what happens, but we can choose how we respond." And responding honestly to the shadow within us is an art of living. Avoiding is easy. Living truthfully is hard. Many people believe that understanding the shadow is enough, but that is only theory. The hardest journey is daring to live a life aligned with what you truly know about yourself. Knowing you are quick to anger yet choosing love. Knowing you were once selfish yet choosing generosity. Knowing you once lived falsely yet daring to live more truthfully each day. That requires courage. Courage to refuse roles, Courage to break repetitive relationships born from unconsciousness. Courage to be alone, to become whole. Living with a shadow, nothing left to hide. We mature not by achieving more, but by no longer being afraid of ourselves. A person who understands their shadow, knowing their jealousy, control, laziness, fear, does not need to perform goodness. And when performance ends, life begins. That is the greatest inner freedom. No need to prove strength. No need to chase perfection. Only radical honesty. Seneca said, "The wise do not display themselves because awareness is enough." When the shadow is embraced, the soul begins to bloom. Darkness is not meant to be destroyed. It is meant to be integrated, understood, and transformed. When you realize that anger is an unacknowledged wound, envy is a buried longing, falsehood is the fear of not being loved, you no longer want to eliminate the shadow. You only want to understand it and become whole. Carl Jung said, "I would rather be a complete human being than a good one." A complete human being is one who dares to live truthfully, with both the light and the darkness within. Returning to yourself where the beginning is also the end. The shadow is the part left behind on the journey of growing up. When we dare to face and embrace it, we make our soul whole again. This is the return of those who have traveled outward and now choose to travel inward. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, peace does not come from the outer world, but from living in accordance with one's nature. If you are beginning to recognize the shadow within you, subscribe to Stoicism Jungian to continue walking this inner path together. Like the video if you feel something moving inside you, and share it with someone exhausted from living untruthfully. Conclusion: true light comes from daring to look into darkness. Have you ever realized the most persistent suffering in life does not come from the outer world, but from what you refuse to face within? We run from the shadow in countless ways. Overworking so we don't hear the inner voice A. Criticizing others to feel superior. Repeating toxic relationships and calling it fate. And worst of all, living behind a mask of kindness, strength, and positivity, but empty inside. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "No one can escape themselves. That is why you should learn to dialogue with your inner world rather than run from it." Carl Jung warned, "You cannot become light without passing through your own darkness." The 1-9, make it how. The shadow is not something to destroy. It is the abandoned part of the soul. It contains creative energy, survival instinct, honesty, courage, and the parts of yourself you lost through fear or pain. When you understand the shadow, you no longer react blindly to attacks life. You no longer hide behind a perfect persona hope. You no longer suppress emotions to appear positive. You begin to live, truly live, not merely perform through the days now. Understanding the shadow is the first step toward becoming an integrated human being, clear enough to awaken, strong enough to take responsibility, and compassionate enough to forgive yourself. Stoicism teaches you not to blame. Jung teaches you not to deny, and together they allow you to be resilient with the world and gentle with yourself. If you are on a journey to find your true self, subscribe to Stoicism Jungian, because videos like this are not just knowledge. They are small lights on a path you must walk alone. Like the video if you feel touched, and leave a comment. Which shadow within you is waiting to be heard? Final message. In an age of falsehood, have the courage to be honest with yourself. The world celebrates glamour, perfection, and victory. But in truth, the most peaceful person is the one who understands their own imperfections and no longer fears them. If you are suffering, lost, disconnected from yourself, remember this: you are not broken. You simply have not yet seen yourself as a whole. The journey of facing the shadow may be frightening, but it is the bravest journey of all, and the greatest gift you can give yourself. Living with strength is an art. Understanding your darkness is the first step toward living truthfully. Stoicism Jungian strong on the outside, deeply understanding within.